He wasn't good. Not much. Hoover didn't like the Kennedys much. We'll kind of get into that a little bit later. He didn't respect him at all. Hoover was an interesting dude, just to say the least. He had tapes. He taped everybody. He had tapes on everybody. He bugged everybody. Okay, event number 2 happens in September of 1962 at the University of Mississippi, and this should bring back a little memory from what we talked about before, okay? September 1962, University of Mississippi, the second event that occurred during the Kennedy administration concerning civil rights. I think we talked about this. On September 20th of 1962, James Meredith, a black military veteran, was denied admission at the University of Mississippi. And we talked about this before when we did 1962 at a glance. Remember we talked about James Meredith. So on September 20th of 1962, James Meredith, a black military veteran, was denied admission at the University of Mississippi. Now you think about this, you don't really, I don't know if you need to write this down, but he joins the Air Force immediately after high school. He serves his country from 1951 to 1960. He goes to Jackson State College for 2 years because it's an all-black college. Then decides he wants to go to the University of Mississippi, and they deny him admission. This guy served our country for 9 years, and they wouldn't let him in. He wouldn't let him in because it was a segregated college. But he's stubborn, so he attempts to register for classes, and he is personally prevented from registering by Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett. The governor goes to the University of Mississippi and personally denies James Meredith admission into the college. This guy was a veteran in the Air Force serving our country for 9 years. And because he was black, they wouldn't let him in. Incredible. So as Meredith attempted to register for classes at Ole Miss, he was personally prevented from registering by Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett. Well, who handled this one? Which Kennedy? President Kennedy gets word of this, and he calls Governor Barnett, and he doesn't ask him, he orders him to allow James Meredith to register for classes at the university. So when word of this gets back to President Kennedy, he personally calls Governor Ross Barnett and orders him to allow Meredith to register at the university. What's Barnett's first response to the president?
No.
No. But after continued pressure from the Kennedy administration, finally Barnett folds and allows Meredith's enrollment. End of story, everybody walks into the sunset, right?
No. President, like, fire or something.
Good.
Does he have to go through like Congress or anything like that?
I think you could temporarily remove a governor until the state legislature impeached him, so to speak. Now, that isn't the end of this story, because the enrollment of James Meredith at the University of Mississippi led to violence, including rioting on campus. Because people, I mean, it's a different time period. We don't even understand this, right? But there were so many people upset about a black man being allowed to integrate the University of Mississippi that violence occurred, including rioting on campus. Now, I want you to think about this in comparison. The rioting got so bad that President Kennedy had to send in 5,000 National Guard troops to restore order. I'm not kidding you. 5,000 National Guard troops had to be sent in by President Kennedy to restore order. Now, this is how bad this rioting was. Why would they send in 5,000 federal National Guard troops to restore order? Let me just tell you why. Because 2 people were killed in this riot. 2 people were killed. 48 National Guard soldiers were injured, restoring order. 48 National Guard soldiers were injured, restoring order. 30 United States Marshals suffered gunshot wounds. 30. Not 1 or 2, 30. Despite all of that, once the National Guard got things under control, James Meredith remained at the college. But he was escorted to classes by federal troops. Can you imagine that? He was escorted to classes by military personnel, soldiers. So the results of the rioting on campus were 2 people left dead, 48 National Guard soldiers injured, 30 U.S. Marshals suffered gunshot wounds. Despite all of that, James Meredith remained at the college, and he was escorted to federal troops to classes. Here's James Meredith right here, holding a paper that says, Meredith off to enroll, Barnett action blocked. And here's the signature of James Meredith.
That's crazy that you have all this stuff.
It is pretty crazy, yes.
So like, to be in like the National Army, Guard,
National Guard.
Sure. Did you like, this is gonna be dumb, but like, did you have to like not be racist because you had to go and do all that kind of stuff?
Oh no,
or
there were
just-
many, my dad was in the military Korea, and he used to always say, 2 things I can't stand, prejudiced people and niggers. He used to say that all the time. People, my dad was very prejudiced, that's how it was in those days. No, you didn't have to show any of that. You just did, you were a soldier, you were ordered to do it, and you went and did it. You didn't defy orders. But no, there were many, there were white soldiers that wouldn't bunk or be in the same area as blacks. Clear through Vietnam, to be honest with you, okay? All right, that'll take us into our third event. This one's a little more interesting. We won't get all the way through it today, but it's interesting. This happened in April of 1963, and it was entitled the SCLC versus the Birmingham Police. Okay, 1963, April of 63, the SCLC versus Birmingham Police. SCLC versus Birmingham Police. Okay? All right. This one here is going to involve Martin Luther King Jr. because in April of 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, had planned a peaceful demonstration in the city of Birmingham, Alabama. Okay? In April of 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the SCLC had planned a peaceful demonstration in the city of Birmingham, Alabama. Now, the purpose of this demonstration was to try to end segregation in the city, which was what? Legal. Very good. But the goal of this peaceful protest is to try to change people's minds, to try to end segregation in the city of Birmingham. And you have to remember that segregation is legal, as Caitlin stated, and segregation would be enforced by law enforcement authorities there. That's the law. We segregate. And if you come in there and do anything against the law, this is different times, right? Rodney King getting beat up. You're too young even to know that story. But, you know, we hear about poor treatment of blacks by the police today, right? But those days, what did you do to somebody if they were breaking the law? You beat the heck out of them. That was okay. There was no police brutality in the 1960s. It just wasn't. Okay? On April 12th of 1963, Dr. King and approximately 50 other protesters led a demonstration on Good Friday in Birmingham, Alabama. On April 12th of 1963, Dr. King and approximately 50 other protesters led a demonstration on Good Friday in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, during this protest, nearly all of the protesters were arrested, including Dr. King, Ralph Abernathy we talked about, Fred Shuttleworth. All these guys were arrested because they broke the law. So they arrested them. So on Good Friday, April 12, 1963, Dr. King and approximately 50 other protesters led a demonstration in Birmingham, Alabama, and nearly all of those protesters were arrested, including Dr. King, Ralph Abernathy, and Fred Shuttleworth. This would be Dr. King's 13th arrest during the civil rights movement to this point. He had been arrested 12 other times. And this probably would be noted as his most important arrest of his civil rights career. Now, they were harsh on Dr. King. They didn't like him. He had a lot of enemies, right? So they put him into solitary confinement during this arrest. They denied him access to his lawyers, and he couldn't have any contact with his wife. That's normal treatment if you're arrested, right? So they put him into solitary confinement. They don't give him any access to a lawyer, and they deny his wife access to him as well. All those things. Well, during his arrest, during his time in solitary confinement, a friend smuggled in a copy of the Birmingham newspaper into his cell. I don't know how he did that exactly, but he did. A friend smuggled in a copy of the April 12th Birmingham newspaper. And what did it cover? All this protest and arrest, right? That was in the paper. Well, the paper also included an editorial. And it was written by 8 local Christian and Jewish religious leaders. So in that April 12th paper that was snuck into his cell was obviously coverage of the event, but it also had an editorial in there. And that editorial was written by 8 local Christian and Jewish religious leaders. What is Martin Luther King? What is his profession? He's a religious leader. What's an editorial? It's an opinion. Terry Rehack, if you ever read our paper, he writes an editorial every day about something. Okay? It's your ability to write, freedom of speech, so to speak, write in the paper what you think. Well, this editorial was in this paper. It was written by 8 local Christian and Jewish religious leaders, and Martin Luther King Jr. read it. And it was very critical of these civil rights demonstrations in Birmingham, and very critical of Dr. King himself. So this editorial that was written by these 8 other Christian leaders and Jewish leaders really criticized the civil rights demonstrations in Birmingham, and very much criticized Dr. King himself. So what is sometimes my dad always said, and I'll tone this down for Julie because I'm trying to get better, but my dad always said, never get in a peeing match with a skunk. Because even though you might win the peeing match, you're still going to smell like the skunk, because obviously he has a little bit more equipment to make you smell that, right? That's not his version, but that's the Julie Warren version. But anyway, well, what did Dr. King decide to do when he read that editorial? Yeah, write a response, right? And that's what my dad would have said. Don't get in a peeing match with a skunk. Just leave it alone, because, you know, you both look bad. But anyway, he decided that he would write a response to that criticism that he received by those 8 local Christian and Jewish religious leaders. Now, he doesn't have any research materials or any notes. He just has a piece of paper and a pencil, and he writes this passionate defense of his use of nonviolent demonstrations. In other words, he writes a rebuttal to what the criticism was in this editorial. And he writes this while he's in jail. Now, he didn't have any paper at first, so what's he writing this on? The newspaper. He's jotting these notes down on the newspaper itself. They finally let his attorneys come in after a while. They finally let him see his attorney. And they would give him scrap pieces of paper, and he would continue to write his response on these scrap pieces of paper. So he's writing on the newspaper and scrap pieces of paper that was given to him by his attorneys. Well, one of his friends, a fellow by the name of Wyatt Walker, began to put his notes together into a complete letter. And Walker finally typed it up, double-spaced. It was 21 pages long, in excess of 7,000 words. A 10 times biography assignment, right? So he is jotting on the newspaper, these scraps of paper, which turns out to be a 21-page typed, double-spaced document in excess of 7,000 words. Now, you don't have to write this down, but he would draw inspiration from St. Augustine, Socrates, Thomas Jefferson, and even Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren. This is where he drew his inspiration. This document went down in American history as Letter from a Birmingham Jail. And you actually have a copy of that. That was in your handouts right here. And what I would like you to do for tomorrow is read through this to the point where we can have a legitimate discussion about it tomorrow. So you have the handout, Letter from a Birmingham Jail. I would like you to read through that for tomorrow and go from there. What we will start with tomorrow will be a review of this letter, and then we will tell you what happened to it and what it resulted in concerning event number 3, because we're not even close to being done. Because he's going to get out of jail, and what's he going to do? Continue his demonstration. Okay?
This isn't all of it, is it?
That is it, yeah.
That
Well,
was 21
no. This is a synopsis of what it was. No, I didn't think you wanted to read 21
I was going to say, I was like, Mr. Durr, did
Yeah.
you really give us that?
No, not the whole thing, but this is basically the part I want you to look at, okay? I mean, that's small print, but not 21 pages, right? Anyway, that's a synopsis I would like you to read for tomorrow so we can have a decent discussion.